Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Tonight, firefighters are still working to contain the Monte Fire in Lakeside. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. The fire has now burned 868 acres and is 20% contained. Evacuation orders and warnings remain in effect at this hour. 3 firefighters have been treated for minor injuries since it broke out yesterday afternoon. KPBS reporter Alexander Nguyen has more on today's firefighting effort.
Crews today are working to put out hotspots near residential areas. CAL FIRE Captain Robert Johnson says that's the main priority so that evacuees can return home.
Once it's safe to do so, we can get those residents back to their houses.
The fire started yesterday afternoon near El Monte Park.
It was very, very scary.
Next to Brenna Drake's ranch.
Yes, I saw the fire start. I was working from home and somebody was driving by and they started honking and I looked outside and I saw the flames. So I called 911. I immediately got out and started trying to get a hose and realized that it wasn't going to happen. So I started evacuating my horses down to the other side of my property.
She says the fire was moving incredibly fast.
The flames were very hot, very high. I wasn't sure if we were going to be able to get out.
Since sheriff's deputies weren't letting trucks through yesterday, Drake says she couldn't evacuate her horses, so she stayed overnight. Fortunately, the fire spread east away from her property and over to the rugged terrain below El Cajon Mountain. Right now, CAL FIRE helicopters is sucking in water from El Capitan Reservoir to bring it over to where the fire is because the terrain is so rugged that firefighters can't get to it.
They do train for this type of terrain and to respond to fires in this type of environment, but it does require some different tactics sometimes. One of those different tactics that they're going to be utilizing today is they're going to fly troops in, firefighters, fire crews, to spots that are inaccessible by ground.
As for when residents can return to their homes, Johnson says that depends on when the hotspots are completely doused. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
Well, we have a lot of changes in our forecast here with at least day-to-day weather evolving as we move into the later part of the week. The worst of the heat wave is going to be behind us soon. The heat's beginning to ease to the east, but temps are going to be down to around 55 in Ramona, 62 into San Diego tonight. Areas to the east still very warm into Borrego Springs, and as temperatures begin to lower, the wind will pick up a little bit. There is some fire danger concern in inland parts of Southern California. Details ahead.
A private jet that crashed into a Murphy Canyon neighborhood last month was flying too low for more than a mile before it clipped power lines. And that is according to a preliminary report released by the NTSB today. The report also noted that part of the airport's lighting system, which helps guide pilots in low visibility approaches, had been out of service since 2022. It didn't say whether the pilot knew the runway lights were out of service. The crash killed all 6 people on board the Cessna and injured 8 people on the ground. President Trump has not confirmed if the U.S. will wade into the growing crisis between Israel and Iran. As Laura Aguirre explains, the U.S. is moving military assets into place to respond to any scenario.
I have a plan for everything, but we'll see what happens. We've got a ways to go.
The president keeping his cards close to the chest when it comes to U.S. intervention between Israel and Iran. Those 2 countries trading military strikes for a 6th day. Israel claims Iran is on the brink of weaponizing their nuclear program. But as recently as March, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard testified that U.S. intel assessed Iran was not actively building a nuclear weapon.
Have the Iranians reached out to you?
Yes.
And what did they say?
I said it's very late.
The Iranian mission to the United Nations responded on X, saying no Iranian official has ever asked to grovel at the gates of the White House and will respond to any action with reciprocal measures.
The more bellicose the Iranians get, I think the higher the chances are that the United States will join with Israel in these strikes on these deeply buried nuclear facilities.
Mr. President, have you given the Iranians an ultimatum?
You could say so. They know what's happening. Maybe you could call it the ultimate ultimatum, right?
What essentially was that, though?
Oh, I don't want to say it.
The USS Ford Carrier Strike Group is now expected to be deployed to Europe next week, making it the third aircraft carrier in close proximity to the conflict, according to 3 sources familiar with the matter. I'm Laura Aguirre for KPBS News.
San Diego is feeling the brunt of the Trump administration's historic increase in immigration enforcement. KPBS reporter Gustavo Solis says the situation is becoming more volatile, with growing tension between Democrats and immigrant rights advocates who disagree on how to approach the situation.
From arresting immigrant workers near El Cajon to detaining people in San Diego's immigration court.
I work with the U.S. military. Just tell me.
And raiding a popular South Park restaurant. Local immigration lawyers say this is what mass deportations look like. Federal agents pressured to meet arrest quotas, targeting anyone they suspect of being in the country illegally, not just immigrants with violent criminal convictions.
When Trump took office, he put into place a number of executive orders and the different memoranda, vastly expanding the scope of enforcement activities. And now we're starting to see the fruits of those memoranda.
Over the last couple of months, we've heard stories of a grandmother, a soccer coach, and a disabled asylum seeker, all being caught in President Donald Trump's deportation machine. We've seen an increase in workplace raids, but other tactics are brand new, like arresting people at immigration court hearings or during scheduled check-ins with ICE. Another new enforcement tactic, revoking student visas.
These are people that are finishing graduate programs, and this is a doctoral program. This is a lot of time invested and a lot of commitment invested. And that to lose this is pretty monumental for somebody who's devoted their lives to do it.
A coalition of nonprofits, humanitarian workers, and lawyers have spent most of this year responding to this new wave of ICE enforcement. Advocates are patrolling immigrant neighborhoods and warning people of potential ICE activity. Lawyers are rushing to federal courthouses and providing pro bono legal aid to people being arrested. Others are fundraising for families of the people detained, including their U.S. citizen partners and children.
The court fiasco, they were there. South Park, they were there. We've got some organizations here in San Diego that do rapid response incredibly well.
And after last month's immigration raid of a South Park restaurant, San Diego's political and labor leaders are becoming more vocal.
Over the past week, the immigration enforcement tactics we've seen in San Diego have crossed a new line.
Saying that it's hypocritical of our society to profit from the work of unauthorized immigrants and then punish them for that work.
This economy has been built on the backs of hard-working immigrants, and now we unleash soldiers to attack them? It is hypocrisy to the cruelest of stages.
And while politicians, labor leaders, and activists all agree that this level of enforcement is problematic, they disagree on how to combat it. Democrats are quick to criticize White House officials and specific enforcement actions, but they still generally support ICE. Congressman Juan Vargas says ICE agents are mostly good people following bad orders.
I've been in office now for some time. I've met a lot of ICE agents. I can assure you that almost every ICE agent there didn't want to be there doing that. They did not want to be in there disrupting, running into a restaurant like that with machine guns to arrest the cook. They're getting those orders from Washington.
On the other hand, immigrant rights advocates say that the entire agency needs to be rebuilt. They point to a history of civil rights abuses and argue that the problem is systemic, not just a few bad apples or a particularly harsh administration.
The infrastructure is a juggernaut. It is huge, it's large, and unless we're calling for an end, a true end to ICE raids, then we have to be truthful about our vision for a just society.
Local labor leaders say that they want Democrats to do more than just press conferences. Local party leaders say that their power is limited. They are the minority party, but they did send the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, a letter demanding an investigation into the San Diego raid. But just a few days later, the Trump administration sent National Guard troops and the Marines to Los Angeles, where people were protesting increased ICE enforcement. At a press conference in Los Angeles, Noem was crystal clear about their plans.
We are not going away. We are staying here to liberate the city.
And at that same press conference, Noem's security detail pushed California Senator Alex Padilla to the ground and handcuffed him after he tried to ask her questions.
Hands behind your back.
If you let my hands go and put them behind my back.
All right. Cool. One hand. Lay flat. Lay flat.
The situation remains volatile. On Sunday, Trump ordered ICE to increase enforcement in what he called Democrat-run cities, like San Diego. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
And an update to that ICE raid of an El Cajon area business back in March. The general manager pleaded guilty today to federal immigration-related charges. Prosecutors said John Washburn employed workers without legal status and let them live inside the company's warehouse. Washburn was sentenced to 1 year of probation in order to perform 50 hours of community service. The Federal Reserve holds interest rates steady, even as President Trump takes aim at the independent central bank. Karen Kafa explains what it means for your money.
The Federal Reserve continuing their cautious approach to interest rates.
We believe that the current stance of monetary policy leaves us well positioned to respond in a timely way to potential economic developments.
The announcement just hours after President Donald Trump called Fed Chairman Jerome Powell stupid and criticized the independent central bank for its hesitation to cut rates.
Am I allowed to appoint myself at the Fed? I do a much better job than these people.
Trump believes a rate cut would help borrowers save on interest and spur them to spend in other areas of the economy. But the Fed sees too much uncertainty, driven in part by Trump's tariffs, his spending bill, and the conflict in the Middle East. There's the potential for inflation to move higher.
With all the uncertainty about tariffs and what impact that might have in the months ahead, it's like waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Greg McBride, chief financial analyst for Bankrate, says the steady U.S. labor market gives the Fed the luxury of time.
We want interest rates to come down because the inflation pressures are receding and the Fed can take the foot off the brake pedal a little bit. We don't want interest rates to come down because the economy is sputtering and it needs the stimulus of lower interest rates.
For the meantime, rates will stay elevated, meaning higher borrowing costs for consumers everywhere from credit cards to auto loans to mortgages. But McBride says the flip side is higher interest earnings on savings accounts. In Washington, I'm Karen Kafa.
San Diego was facing big budget cuts this year, but the city council brought back many popular things. In our latest Why It Matters segment, Voice of San Diego CEO Scott Lewis says they're making some risky bets to pull it off.
Most San Diego City Council members were very pleased with themselves last week. They reversed big budget cuts to library and recreation center hours that the mayor had proposed. And they restored beach fire rings and the Office of Race and Equity. The mayor had wanted to cut both. How did they do all this? Where did they find the money? The council, it turns out, made some big bets on future money. They said the city could get more than $9 million from some new sources. And if they win those bets, it will change life in San Diego a little bit. Let's start with parking. The city council wants non-residents to pay to park their vehicles in Balboa Park. Of course, then people will just park for free at the zoo, so they want the zoo to charge as well. And they want some of that money that comes in to go to the city. That's going to be a big negotiation. And then there are the billboards. You may have noticed that, unlike some parts of the country, we do not have many billboards in San Diego. Decades ago, San Diegans had long battles about billboards. The city restricted them very severely and even got taken to the U.S. Supreme Court. Thurgood Marshall and other justices declared that its rules were too strict. And then in the 1980s, the city finally got an ordinance to stick. No more new billboards. The billboards you see now were mostly in place before then. Businesses can have their own signs, but our roads have far fewer distractions than other cities. Fast forward to now. the city council is seeking every dollar it can find, so it decided to make a deal with the 3 main companies that control existing billboards. If they get rid of one of their billboards each and pay the city millions of dollars, they can turn the other ones into digital billboards. And digital billboards can charge a lot more, and they can change more often. The city council estimated it can get $3 million next year from these new deals. But if my inbox is any indication, people are going to fight those billboards. And that means the council's bet on future money could be in jeopardy. The independent budget analyst warned the council it was getting into some dicey territory.
These may or may not be realistic amounts, but we have not vetted them. And I would note that the city's budget is already relying on optimistic assumptions. And so if the council chooses to move forward assuming these revenues, that will be exposing the city to additional risk.
Just yesterday, the mayor made more changes to the budget that he says will cut about a quarter of the council's new spending. But he's keeping the library and recreation center hours they restored. And now the council will decide whether to override his changes. I'm Scott Lewis for Voice of San Diego, and that's why it matters.
Voice of San Diego is one of our partners for the Public Matters Initiative. You can learn more at kpbs.org/Public Matters. Organizers of Saturday's No Kings protests are now saying 69,000 people showed up downtown. That is 9,000 more than the original estimate from law enforcement. KPBS reporter Jacob Ayer looks at how they calculated that number and what crowd sizes can mean for a political movement.
The crowds that showed up at Saturday's protests weren't just big, they're being called unprecedented.
You had numerous events across the county, from Escondido down to the waterfront in San Diego. And in the city of San Diego, you had the largest protest crowd, I think, that we've ever seen.
Take Action San Diego was one of the groups that organized the protest. Larry Stowell is a volunteer with the group. He was in charge of tracking the crowd size. The first crowd estimate of 60,000 plus came from a method which looks at the density of people in one section of the protest and multiplies that over the whole crowd. The updated estimate of 69,000 uses a method that's a little more high-tech, combining aerial news footage with on-the-ground video from the group's own stationary cell phone.
And those two combined give us the ability to get a reliable and pretty good estimate of the crowd that's at a march.
They're sharing the data for their findings on the Take Action San Diego website.
So we use an open source methodology and reproducible research. So we provide, if there's some computer code that helps out, we provide the code. Like in this report that we'll put out, we'll actually have that code that we use, which is not much, and we'll have all the raw data. So all the data we collected, so if somebody else wants to analyze the data also.
The San Diego Police Department used the original number of 60,000 in their statements about the protest. They say they got it from the organizers.
The 60,000 was on the low end. They had numbers that went all the way up to 80,000.
Lieutenant Travis Easter says SDPD does not track protest crowd sizes independently.
At the time when those events are happening, we're focused on keeping everybody safe, traffic control, making sure it's peaceful, lawful, safe. That's where our focus is.
For a politically focused protest, this was the biggest in our history. And that's significant. It means San Diegans are really motivated on this particular set of issues.
Carl Luna is director at University of San Diego's Institute for Civil Civic Engagement. He says San Diego is normally a town where it's challenging to politically activate the masses.
You can go back to the George Floyd protests. Those tended to be sporadic and in the hundreds to the low thousands. You go back to the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King came here to talk in the 1960s. Those crowds were in the hundreds to low thousands.
Luna said the next largest political protest in San Diego was the 2017 Women's March, where over 30,000 people showed up. He believes last Saturday's turnout was so high because people feel disenfranchised and helpless.
When you get that many people together, you realize you are not alone, and now you can start focusing on more coordinated action to affect politics and policy.
Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
Next week, the seismic shake table at UC San Diego will test the strength of a 10-story building made from cold-formed steel. KPBS SciTech reporter Thomas Fudge tells us about this recycled material and what it offers.
The earthquake shake table is in Scripps Ranch just east of the I-15, and now a building towers above it. Cold form steel is what it's made of. Its load-bearing system, its walls, floors, and roofing. In the real world, a building like this could only be 6 stories high in a seismic zone like California.
So a big aspect we're testing here is, can we push the envelope and see robust seismic performance beyond 6 stories? And so you see, we got a 10-story building, so we're all really excited. We've already broken code limitations with this structure.
Cold form steel, or CFS, got its name because its final formation is done with brakes and presses at room temperature. It's supplied to builders in coils of thin steel.
The raw material is sheet steel. It's some of the same steel that goes into the automotive industry to make fenders and bumpers and hoods.
Don Allen works with a steel construction industry group. He says cold form steel is recycled steel. The material comes from old cars, fridges, ovens. That steel is melted down and pressed into sheets that are less than 1/10 of an inch thick. But Allen says CFS is surprisingly strong.
And the thing is, once you melt it down and get it back down to its iron molecules, then you can make steel out of it that's stronger than the original steel. So if you're making a refrigerator, that side of that refrigerator doesn't have to be very strong at all, but you can melt that down and make this stuff that can carry these 10, 15-story structures.
The advantages of cold form steel include its small carbon footprint due to recycling. It's non-combustible, very strong, but very lightweight. UCSD shake tested a 10-story wood frame building made of mass timber a couple of years ago, also environmentally friendly, but Hutchinson says it was twice as heavy as the CFS building we see now.
Now, if you're in a seismic realm, the earthquake realm, lightweight materials are fantastic because the forces that we're going to generate are directly proportional to the mass that we put into the structural system. So if we can lighten up the structural system, we can reduce those seismic, what we call seismically induced forces.
The cold form steel building will be tested on the earthquake shake table on Monday. If the test is successful, Hutchinson hopes to see a code change to allow greater use of the material in the near future. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
As we take a look at the headlines here, we have a lot of changes brewing. The heat wave is going to be diminishing, winding down here. The worst of the heat is behind us for this stretch. But as the wind picks up and as the heat kind of departs to the east, at least the worst of it, the fire danger is going to be escalating over the next few days, especially in inland parts of Southern California. We will be cooling down, though, for the first official weekend of summer. So for now, just for the final stages of this heat advisory here, many areas across inland Southern California, we'll be seeing these heat advisories end at 8 o'clock Pacific time tonight. And as we look at the overnight forecast, we'll get down to 62. Some low clouds return, that typical coastal marine layer of clouds. And the heat's going to begin to shift east. But with that transition, the wind picks up, and that is where the problem begins to exist with fire danger escalating. Now, it's still going to be hot on Thursday. The heat wave is not going to end abruptly, but we're just going to begin to see temperatures ease down a little bit. We're still at 109 in Borrego Springs, 90 in Ramona, 83 in El Cajon, 84 Escondido, and still in the 70s, obviously, into areas around San Diego, 72 degrees there. The worst of the fire danger is going to be into the Great Basin, but we do have moderate fire danger in far inland parts of Southern California Thursday, Friday, and by the time we get to Saturday and Sunday, some of the worst of this begins to shift a little farther east. But the winds will be active, and even into the weekend, we'll have some fire danger concerns. Now, there's going to be much cooler air. Deep trough really sets in. And look at this. As summer officially begins, we actually have a little bit of snow on the map, way, way, way to our north and way up in the highest elevations of sections of Montana, Idaho, and even Oregon. Pretty impressive blast of cold and snow up in the highest elevations for the beginning of summer. But for us here, we're seeing temperatures hedge barely downward. And we'll see a little bit more cooling into early next week, but a nice stretch. Morning clouds, afternoon sunshine, mid-70s down to the low 70s. Inland areas here, we're dealing with readings in the mid-80s Thursday, and then temperatures do steadily lower into Saturday, mid-70s. In the mountains here, we're going to find some pretty good comfort, mid-60s. Come Saturday and Sunday. There will be some fire danger out there. Just be aware of that with that breeze. And the deserts do back down into the double digits beginning Saturday, Sunday, and Monday as summer officially begins. Still hot, though, for a couple more days. For AccuWeather, I'm Jeff Cornish for KPBS News.
And we have another update for you on the Monte Fire that is burning in Lakeside. CAL FIRE just updated containment to 25% with 868 acres burned at last check. It is north of Interstate 8 near El Monte Park. The fire started on Tuesday afternoon. 3 firefighters have been injured. The fire is burning in an area just north of homes, but there is no reported damage to any structures. Some evacuation orders remain in effect for that area.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, why the Supreme Court is upholding a state ban on transgender care. That's coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Tomorrow is known as Juneteenth. KPBS Midday Edition is diving into the history and the significance of the holiday with a USD professor. The Hotel del Coronado is celebrating the end of its 6-year, $550 million renovation project. Today, they are showcasing the newly renovated guest rooms that have been shut down for over a year. Our media partner, KGTV, got a sneak peek, and the hotel also upgraded the main lobby, the front porch, and added new dining areas. The Hotel del Coronado is the oldest wooden hotel on the West Coast, and officials say the renovations merge the new and the old.
I think when they enter the building, they enter the room, they're going to see something that is unique and defines the kind of Victorian era, yet still has modern touch points that make it comfortable for people.
And if you don't know already, the Del is a National Historic Landmark. The hotel officials say this restoration is all about preservation, so people can enjoy the iconic hotel for the next 100 years. If you're interested in diving into all of the details of the Hotel Del's restoration, you can check out Historic Places with Elsa Sevilla. You can watch the first 2 parts now on the PBS app, and the 3rd and the final episode will air Monday, June 30th at 9 p.m. right here on KPBS. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following: by viewers like you. Thank you.